Hello engineers, welcome to JAL Consult. Today's video will be the second part of our tutorial series, Electrical Cable Design. If you've not seen the first part, please click on the link in the comment section below, as it will go a long way in understanding today's video. After we've explained the structured wiring or low voltage system, today I will be elucidating the high voltage wiring. But before I proceed, I did like to carry out a poll. Comment your answer, as it will go a long way in understanding today's tutorial. A CCTV camera needed to be powered and send information to the decoder spontaneously. How will this be achievable? And which kind of cable will you recommend as an electrical building services engineer for the system? These are the kind of cable we do use for our electrical distribution, home accessories, and appliances. We will be expatiating this kind of cables based on these two headings. 1. The sizing and the colors. 2. Their classifications. Cable sizing is the major aspect an electrical building services engineer look up to, because it's the most critical part in electrical design. We will briefly explain it now, as details and further explanation will come up later. Most especially during our load estimate and project designing classes. We have two standards in sizing a cable. We have the American wire gauge system and the metric system. Although cable size is basically a unit of the diameter of the conductor inside the cable, but the cable cross-sectional area is the most important to a building services engineer, as it relates directly to the current carrying capacity of the cable. The cable color, on the other hand, is an indication of the standard usage of the cable, or an indication for the size of wire inside the cable. For example, white cables majorly represent neutral wires, while the greens do represent our ground. Red and black do represent the earth. Or it expresses the sizes, where yellow mostly represents a 20 ampere cable, and shorted cables, shorted white cables, do represent 15 ampere. Although different clients do has their own jurisdictions, and sometimes it can even serve as an identification of standard for a specific project or in a specific company. For example, a company may decided to be using red for ground. Let's proceed to the second subheading, which is the classification of cables. We will be elucidating this using the following four subheadings. 1. Classification of cables according to their voltage grades. 2. Classification of cables according to the conductor type. 3. Classification of cables according to the insulation type. And the last of them is the classification of cables according to the core numbers. Classification of cables according to their voltage grades. There is no specific standard in the industry for figuring or for grading cables, but for educational purpose, Cables can be graded to these 5 categories. The first category is the low voltage grades cables. The low voltage grades cables are the cables that can withhold voltage up to 1 kilovolt. They are the common cables we do see in our residential environment. The second categories we can grade cables is the medium voltage grades cables, which are the cables that can withhold up to 11 kilovolts. They are majorly used in distribution industry, specifically distribution in residential environment. The third classification we can grade cables is the high voltage grade cables, which are cables that can withhold up to 33 kV. We still have the extra high voltage grades, which are the cables that can withhold up to 66 kilovolts. And the last of them all is the pressurized cables. Pressurized cables are the cables that can withhold above 66 kilovolts. This is achievable because the main cable will be surrounded by an atmospheric pressure, such as oil, gas, so as to keep the cable temperature down. Our second subheading, which is the classification of cables according to the conductor type. Aluminum and coppers are the two conductors we do use in building industry. Although we still have the armored cables, which are made up of any of the two, but are being protected from mechanical stresses with a steel material and sometimes an aluminum material. Aluminum cables is the cheapest, lightest, and the oldest form of cabling, although being deprecated at some point. This is because of its oxidation and corrosion effect. The oxidation effect of aluminum occurs when an aluminum cable, particularly the cable ends, are exposed to air. A resistant oxide coating will be formed at that end, which this coating do makes contacting difficult and thus increase the cable's temperature. This can eventually set the cable ablaze. As an engineer, it does recommended to always brush and grease the cable's end before contacts are made. And the corrosion effect of aluminum is due to its poor water resistance. When copper cables come in contact with an aluminum cables that had been affected by an electrochemical reaction, a tiny decomposition will be created on the aluminum cable. This decomposition do increase the cable temperature and can eventually set the cable ablaze. Using cable locks, such as the aluminum cables, bimetal connectors, press connectors, when making connection, do rectify this effect. Other than these two, aluminum cable is a successive alternative to copper cables, particularly in terms of its performance and pricing when proper techniques are used. Moreover, aluminum are 70% lighter than copper cables of the same amount. This does makes their installation to require a less tensile force. They are majorly used for electrical transmission purpose, distribution and transmission purpose. But copper cables, on the other hand, are resistant, to corrosion and are suitable for indoor and outdoor wiring. Copper cables also have a higher conductivity, specifically 40% greater than aluminum. Other than they are expensive, they are available in all sizes, unlike the aluminum cables. Copper cable size is even 1/3 of aluminum with the same conductivity. Awesome. Let's proceed to the classification of cables according to the insulation type. We can classify electrical cables based on insulation into 3 groups. We have the plastic insulated cables, rubber or thermosetting cables, and the paper-based cables. This is where we have our PVC cables, which are the most widely used cables in the industry because of being cheap and durable. We also have our PE cables in these categories, which are used for higher voltages. The second group, which is the rubber or thermosetting cables. The cables in these categories includes the cross-linked polyethylene cables and the EPR cables, which are mainly useful for high temperature application. The third group, which is the paper-based cables, are used for the extra high voltages. The last classification of cables is according to their core numbers. We can have a cable to be a single core or a multiple cores cable. The multiple cores cables can be 2, 3, or 4 cores. Hope you find this video educational, as this will be what our system circuiting and cable selection will be based upon while designing. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really makes my day. Hope you enjoy this video. See you next class.